So you can see that. So if it is a operative fixations, no active ranges, gentle, passive and assisted range of motion exercises. That is also in supine position. Okay, not in other positions. Okay, after that, if it is endoprosthesis. Okay, so if you have any any implants, the prosthetic fixations are there means same. You can start the passive, assistive shoulder range of exercises. But the only thing is you need to avoid internal and external rotation. Okay, avoid internal and external rotation. Other than that, we can start in the second to fourth week. We can start gentle, passive and assistive range of motion exercises, specifically in supine lying. Okay. And if it is any tissue problem like rotator cuff injury, or if they are dissecting, or whether they are using rotator cuff approach, maybe any muscles are involved, rotator cuff muscles are involved in that surgery means you can limit elevation and external rotation. Okay, that is very important. This is for second to fourth week. Okay, for proximal humerus fracture, for non-operative or conservative management, you can go for gentle active range of motion exercises and gravity eliminated pendular exercises, but only restriction is internal and external rotation. And then operative fixation, you don't have to do no active range of motion exercises. Only thing it's allowed is gentle, passive and assistive range of motion exercise in supine. Okay, this is for operative fixations. And then for endoprosthesis and all, if it is an intact rotator cuff means the same thing, but avoid the internal and external rotation. And for if rotator cuff is not it's involved, if any surgical procedure has the dissection of rotator cuff muscle, then you go for the same thing, but limited elevation and external rotation. This is a protocol on second to fourth week. Okay, next one is the fourth to sixth week. Okay, so fourth to sixth week, like 1 to 1.5 months, right? So 1 to 1.5 months fracture immobilization, we can, like for conservative management, you can do isometrics, advance the isometric exercises. And for operative fixation, continue with the same, whatever you are doing, like the passive and assistive range of motion. Okay, and same for endoprosthesis, intact rotator cuff also, you can continue with passive assistive range of motion exercises. But if any tissue involvement is there, like rotator cuff injury is not intact means we can have the passive shoulder range of motion exercise with limited elevation and external rotation. This is what we can do in the fourth to sixth week. Okay, so now you can see that only thing is isometrics given for conservative management. Okay, after that, the final one is 6th to 8th week, because each and every type of fracture should be handled in different ways. You need to know that. Mid shaft fracture is little bit, that's why I told you it's easy to heal, as well as the time frame is also little bit we can start yearly, and then the improvement is also very high success rate in mid shaft fractures compared to proximal and distal humerus fracture. Okay, so in this thing, for 6th to 8th week, you can start all the things like active range with terminal stretching also, the end pressure and end stretching also you can give without any problem for non-operative fixation. Operative also same, you can start all the things in the 6th to 8th week. And in this thing, you can start advanced isometric exercises in the endo processes with intact rotator cuff. Okay, and here also you can start all the isometrics as well as all the active shoulder range of motion exercise. Very rarely or exceptional cases only you need to delay the delay this protocol. Otherwise, 90 to 95% of cases you can follow this method. It's very safe. And then 8th to 12th week, everything, all the thing in the another ranges. For example, 90 till 90 it is available, means you can increase it. For the 8th to 12th week, we can progress it gradually. And then one more thing is, here in this stage, you can start the isotonic resisted exercises. Okay, so that is the important point. You can start doing resisted exercises. That is not isometric, isotonic types. You can start in the 8th to 12th week. And after that, all the things you are continuing. Okay, like a resisted exercise with increasing resistance, and range is attained, means maybe 130, 140, means you can increase the further thing with capsular stretching, everything for the 12th to further weeks. Okay. That's it for proximal humerus fracture. Now we are moving to shaft fracture. That's why I already told you, like it's a very common, second most common birth fracture, and maybe like breech presentation sometimes. Once again. Sorry for the delay. Okay, so the peculiarities of humeral shaft fracture, in the birth fractures or during labor time or during delivery, we have some common fractures, like next to clavicle. This is the second most one. Okay, after that we have like the more bulky muscles or surrounded here. So we have some advantages and disadvantages of this type of fracture. Like here in this area, the compound fractures like open fracture or more complicated one are very rare. Okay, that is one thing. And then the healing is also very well because of the thick muscle coverage. You have adequate periosteal blood supply, so it will unite in a quicker way and more easy compared to other types of fractures. And one more thing is the malunion. If something like abnormality or wrongly united fractures also cannot be that visible. Okay, because of the thick muscle coverage, you don't have that cosmetic problems also. And one more thing is by like after remodeling, it may be like more or less healed, or it can correct it by itself. Okay, that is there. And shortening is also, that is not that markable. Sometimes it may happen. Shortening would be there, means what happened means in the lower limb, the shortening is more visible or more prominent because of gait. There is a deviation in your gait pattern because of that shortening in lower limb. Compared to upper limb, it is not that uh, visible or prominent. Okay, so that these are all advantages of humeral shaft fracture. Disadvantages, sometimes it may have wide display because of the gravity. If you hang your shoulder or your arm by the side, normally the gravity will influence the downward displacement. That's why maybe there is a greater chance for malunion. That gravitational effect can delay the union, or maybe it cause malunion problems. And also major muscles also is there. Very rarely you get malunion problems, malunion or non-union. So these are first one is the transverse shaft fracture, and then this one is spiral. So whenever you get a patient with a spiral fracture, you need to check the radial nerve. Radial nerve palsy is very common in spiral fractures. Because of that force, it may cause injury to the radial nerve that is located posterior to the shaft of humerus. Sorry. Okay, so mechanism of injury, the type of pattern of injury is mainly motor vehicle accident. For all the things, majority of the thing is fall on outstage stand, and then the high impacted motor vehicle accidents. Okay, so the fracture pattern also depends on the type of stress applied. Okay, so okay, so compressive type. The fracture pattern depends on stress applied. Okay, so compressive means maybe any compressive force. The most common pattern is the proximal or distal humerus fracture. And bending, the bending force is there, means the transverse fracture of the shaft. So the mainly this type of fractures are due to bending or torsional. Sometimes the twisting force is there, means it causes the spiral fracture of the shaft. And sometimes the torsion and bending effect both are there, means it may cause oblique fracture. Okay, these are the various patterns and various types of fractures you may have. Okay, so investigations, the clinical examination, thorough history taking, and physical examination is very important, right? So other like other types of fractures, here also the patient typically complains with pain, swelling and deformity, right? So that is there. And one more thing is here you need to know the neurovascular exams is very important, because the radial nerve is very commonly injured. Maybe immediately after injury you can come to know this, or 2 to 3 days later it may develop. The we cannot extend it. So we need to check after injury, and then first day, second day, and for like first 2 weeks we have to be careful with this radial nerve injury. So wrist extensors, the finger extensors, you need to check it. And then any other numbness or paresthesia, any other type abdominal sensations are there, we need to check that. Okay. And other thing is radiographic findings would be there. And if it is a severely comminuted fractures means you need to take traction radiographs to find out the correct placements. Okay. So management. So when it comes to management, we have like 90% of the mid shaft fractures, we can go for conservative management, any POP, functional bracing. Okay, so the remaining 10%, we need to go for any surgical corrections. And yes, when it is acceptable, when it is non-surgical method is acceptable means maybe like 20 degrees of anterior angulation. Okay, up to 20 degrees of anterior angulation and 30 degrees of varus angulation. Okay, sometimes there is a medial placement of the proximal segment compared to distal one. So 30 degrees of varus angulation would be there, or up to 3 centimeter of shortening. Okay, so till this level, like less than 20 degrees and less than 30 degrees of varus angulation and up to 3 centimeter of shortening are all acceptable, and we can go for conservative management. After that, if it is going beyond 20 degrees of anterior angulation or more than 30 degrees of varus or greater than 3 centimeter of shortening, then we need to go for surgical one. And the most treatment begins with this splinting. There is a one coaptation splint. It's very commonly used. What is coaptation splint means? We have some type of U slab. We are using the U slab to do the conservative management. I'll see. We'll see it in detail in the next slide. Okay, so otherwise normal POP, normal hanging arm cast can be used. And after that, when it is developing, like the callus formation and bridging is there, yeah, visible bridging formation is there, after checking radiograph, you can go for bracing. Okay. Okay, so this is what we call it U slab. We can use commonly, we can use the U slab, and like while giving traction, okay, some other assistant should lift or give the counter traction, and then the orthopedic surgeon will give some other way, like this counter opposed to the counter traction, he will give the traction, and then during that time they have to apply this U slab. Okay, so this is what normally while doing the traction effect, we need to apply that splinting, that apply the U slab. Okay. Otherwise, we can just like that splint the fracture. If it is this undisplaced means we don't give traction, just like that we can fit it. But in the displaced fractures, we need to do this closed reduction. That is without opening any surgical parts. We are giving counter traction and then applying that U slab. This is for conservative method. Okay. And for young children, they are not that mobile, like with the birth fractures. In the birth fracture and all, simple splinting is enough. And for young children, simple sling is more than enough for them. And hanging cast, when we go for this type of thing, this is normally we can see it, right? POP application with the elbow flexed to 90 degree. So hanging cast is useful for older children and adolescents. Okay, for young children, you can go for slings, and a birth fracture, you can give simple splinting. But a POP application and hanging cast is useful for older children and adolescents. And one more thing is the gravity is also helpful in correcting the displacement. Okay. And one more thing is, if the cast is too heavy, means it may cause too much of distraction, and thereby it delay the healing, or it may cause non-union also. Okay, the hanging cast has benefits as well as some cons, pros and cons would be there. Like what I'm saying is, like sometimes that will cause effective traction, but too much of weight, excessive weightage to the POP or hanging cast is heavy weighted means it may cause the distraction and delay the union also. So hanging cast, U slab, and then cast bracing. So this bracing is maybe we can give it in the later stages after third week. If it is if the bridging formation or some kind of visibility is there, that union visibility is there, means we can go for cast braces. Okay, that's what I told you. This is that splint, that U slab, or you can give it U splint, whatever it is. We can place it and then immobilize. Okay, so how we can, this is very widely used in the conservative management. Like the two important management for mid-shaft fractures are this one, coaptation splint, and other one is functional bracing. So we have different procedures. First one is traction apply. One is traction is applied while the splint is placed over. Okay, this is the first procedure. And then you need to fit it exactly like deltoid, up to deltoid, laterally, under the elbow, and up to the axilla, the correct placement. The second thing is the accurate placement of splinting is very important. And one after that, third one is elastic wrapping or any gauze, whatever we can apply it, right? Dressing, you need to apply it around that splint. And then important thing is you need to have some prevent axillary irritation or injury to axillary structures. We need to give correct padding, pad support to prevent friction and irritation to that area. And fifth one is, after all the things, sling is used. Arm slings can be used. And this is what we call it, functional cast brace. Nowadays, it is widely used, and like recent evidences, most of the evidences supports using functional cast brace, like the rehabilitation part as well as the healing, right? And then everything gets improved whenever we use this functional cast brace, but the timing of usage is very important. Yes, that is there. How yearly we start this functional bracing, that much improvement is available for us. Okay, so that is the highlight of functional cast bracing. Quick recovery, and we don't have to spend much time on rehabilitation whenever we use this functional cast bracing. Okay, the management, like when we use this operative things, indication for operative management is failed conservative treatment. If it is it's not properly healed, or it is not some other problems are there, means you can go for that. And multiple fractures, maybe two upper limb fractures, one other side. If it is so, you can go for the surgical one. Multiple fractures and unstable fractures and multi-system injuries, because surgery is fixed actually. For multiple system injuries, they need to do surgery. So at the whole, we can, it's easy to progress, or we can quicken the recovery process. Okay. Anyway, we are starting the surgical thing, so we can for this reason also the operative management is important. And radial nerve palsy, after closed reduction, if there is any weakness or loss of sensation in the in the posterior aspect of wrist and hand muscles, in that way we can go for operative management. And pathological fractures like osteoporotic complaints or weakness, this kind of things are there, means you need to quicken the process of rehabilitation. Otherwise, the pathological fractures can be worsened. Okay, so and then the compound fractures, segmental fractures, intra-articular and bilateral humeral fractures, both sides, and brachial plexus injuries, and the same side shoulder and forearm fractures. These are all the main indications we are go for operative management. Otherwise, the 90% of cases, it's conservative only. Okay, which method when we need to use, right? So this the plating, the plates and this kind of things are for fractures at all levels. Again, still now we are using this this plating and screw fixations. Okay, so a radial nerve injury is a important thing. If it is there, if there is a great chance for radial nerve injury in this type of fixations. Another one is this one, intramedullary fixations. This is also widely used, like how in the femur we are using, right? So this is also very, very widely used. This is humerus plating, and this one is intramedullary nailing. Okay. So there are various things. So external fixation for open fractures. And if it is like multiple, sometimes we need to divide the components. Maybe it is a single intramedullary nailing is there, right? Sometimes 2 or 3 nailing can be given on different aspects. So the most widely used, like long back, decades back, this plating is widely used, but nowadays the research and so many things indicates that intramedullary fixations are better compared to other types of things. Nowadays they feel this interlocking intramedullary nail technique is more advantageous than plating and screws. Otherwise, if it is unstable or some other complications is there, means our plates and screws are widely used. And then we have the distal 1/3 of the shaft. If there is any fracture in that, we need to check. The other name for that is Holstein-Lewis fracture. And here you can see that there is an entrapment of radial nerve. Okay, so rehabilitation for mid-shaft fractures. So day 1 to day like first week, what are the things we have to do and we don't do means no lifting. You already know that. So affected extremity, there shouldn't be any lifting, weight lifting kind of thing. And range of motion, if it is in a brace or splint, okay, if you're already in a functional bracing, or if you're using coaptation splints, means you need not do any range of motion exercises to shoulder and elbow. Just completely avoid these two things. And if it is in external fixation or open reduction and internal fixation, then we can start the gentle active and active assistive range of motion. Okay, only thing is if the fixation is very stable, as well as the bone bone component is also stronger. Like instead of brittle, weak, pathological bones, if it is a very strong fixed one, means we can go for assistive, gentle, active, and active assistive range of motion. And pendular exercises with gravity elimination, you can go for pendular exercises. And no muscle strengthening, no functional activities, no weight bearing. And second week also same, no lifting or weight bearing and all. And if it is only intramedullary rodding, so if this one is there, like interlocking nails along with the intramedullary rod is there, means we can go for weight bearing, mild weight bearing. Okay, so no weight bearing for other management. Only thing is limited weight bearing with rod. Intramedullary rodding is used, means you can allow limited, okay, tolerable weight bearing can be allowed. Otherwise, other methods you can't do that. Okay, and one more thing is range of motion. How we can do range of motion means like the same way, active and active assistive range of motion to the elbow and shoulder. You can start that, but with splint and brace, no abduction beyond 60 degrees. Okay, that is very important in the conservative management only. You can start the active and active assistive exercises, but abduction shouldn't go beyond 60 degrees. Very, very important that no, some kind of no, or you are not allowed to do. And this kind of things are very important to remember. Okay, so muscle strength also, no strengthening exercises, and only uninvolved side is used for functional activities. Okay, but if it is open reduction and internal fixation or external fixation is there, means very mild ADLs like feeding, light grooming, slightly like you can use for writing. You can use this if it is any internal fixations. In internal and external fixation, you can involve your extremity in mild activities, but no weight bearing. Okay, you need to know the differences. Functional activity, ADL means all the work without lifting any weights. Okay, so weight bearing means lifting and pushing your weight or pushing your arm, like supported lifting, supported standing. That is not advisable. Okay, but you can involve it if it is internal fixation and external fixation. And 4th to 6th week, no heavy lifting. Okay, and range of motion, so you can start freely all the active and active assistive ranges. And muscle strength, isometric and isotonic exercises. Okay, here in this stage you can start the for forearm muscles. Okay, for forearm muscles, isometric and isotonic can be started, and then after 6th week we can start biceps and triceps. You can start isometric exercise to major muscles, and you can involve it, but advise them that more usage or pain is there, means immediately stop them, stop the exercise or ADL activities. That is important. Okay, so whenever it is delayed, the longer the week it goes, we can add up, we can start all the exercises. So like if it is 4th to 6th week, we have to be very careful with that. After that, it is everything can be progressed according to the symptom clearance. Okay, and if it is an internal fixation, you can start as early as from the 4th week also. Yearly weight bearing is started. And then all the things, now you can see that only no, if it is if he's a sports person, no contact sports. And range of motion, you can start PRE, the progressive resisted exercise, like 8th to 12th week. We can almost all the things you can start. And functional activities also you can use it, and weight bearing also, full weight bearing, everything can be started from 8th to 12th week. Okay, So that's it for mid shaft fracture. Okay, after that, now we are coming to the distal one, distal end of the humerus. You want break or shall we continue? Shall we have break or? Okay, maybe if you want, we will have 5 minutes break. Okay. Okay, so shall we start? This is after completing our proximal humerus fracture and then mid-shaft fracture, we are coming to intercondylar fractures. Okay, so like in the distal end, what are the types? There are various types of fractures in the distal end, and out of this, we have the most common one called supracondylar. Okay, out of all the things, the supracondylar fracture that is specifically common in children's. Okay, very common in children's. Okay, now we have T or Y fractures, intercondylar T or Y type of fractures. Okay, the shape of the segments, right? So T-shaped or Y-shaped fractures. So main thing about this fracture is both lateral and medial condyles of the humerus are separated. Okay, so lateral and medial condyles are separated from each other through any pattern, typical T or Y pattern. So this is T fracture, this is Y. And then we have displaced, sometimes the displaced intercondylar fracture. The humerus are more complicated and it is intra-articular. So we have some problem with during rehabilitation, you have problem with your elbow joint. Elbow joint mobilization is very important. Whenever it is intra-articular, we need to put our effort more. So mechanism of injury, like so mostly it's indirect trauma due to road traffic accidents, or sometimes very severe falls, high speed falls, this kind of things are the very common reason we have. And one more thing is we have there is a impacted one also. The impact of the ulna over the trachea will cause the later, there is greater displacement. Because of this sudden thrusting force from your ulnar bone, there is a lateral and medial condyle gets separated. And after that, it doesn't come back to the normal position because of that pull exerted by other muscles, surrounding muscle, because we have all the flexors of the forearm and hand muscles, and the other side is all the extensor muscles, and then all the big muscles are also crossing this area. So retaining the normal alignment is little bit difficult. Okay, the classification of this intercondylar fractures. Okay, type 1 undisplaced, always the type 1 or more stable one. Okay, undisplaced fracture and between the capitulum and trochlea. Okay, that is there. And type 2 is separation of the capitulum and trachea without any rotation. So type 2 is simply it's get displaced and there is no change in the horizontal plane. Okay, that is there. And the type 3 is separation of the fragments along with some rotations. So why it is very we need to know that, means the rotational aspect is very difficult to correct with closed reduction. Okay, only it is impacted or sometimes it is displaced medially. Any one aspect or one plane displacement, it's easy to correct. But any aspect of rotations and all and very small pieces, it breaks into small components and all, it's very difficult for us to, without any surgery, it's not applicable. Okay, so here also the type 3 is So we have rotational component. Surely it's like 90%, more than that, we have to go for surgical correction. And then the type 4. Type 4 is almost it's a like combinated one. Can you see that this is type 1 undisplaced, and this is displaced, right? And this is rotational component is there, and type 4 is like we cannot align it with the closed reduction. This type 3 and type 4 are very rarely we can correct it through conservative management. Maybe any other issues that surgery is very high risk means we can try to unite it through conservative management. Otherwise, the type 3 and type 4 are most commonly proceeded by surgical one. Diagnosis, here the same. All the things are swelling, pain, deformity, and shortening would be there. Arm appears shortened. And one more thing is, important thing is that relationship between the triangular relationship between epicondyles and olecranon is disturbed. Okay, 1 second. This one. These two condyles, medial and lateral epicondyle and olecranon. Whenever we flex the elbow, we have some have triangular relationship, and after that extend it means it comes to the same line. This is very important in X-ray also. If there is any collapse in this equilateral triangle, or is there any change in the line, there is a break in the line, then we need to check for the, maybe it's a fracture actually. Okay, so this is very important. The relationship between that triangle should be maintained intact. Otherwise, we need to check, or if we need to go for further radiographic or any other examination. Any imaging needed, you can go for that. And normally after that, movements are restricted, either due to pain or muscle guarding, due to maybe inhibition also. Some important muscles may go for weakness and it doesn't produce any movement. That is there. And associated soft tissue injuries, here also we need to check the related injuries, other associated injuries. So ligament ruptures is very common in this aspect. So in this distal end fracture, the medial and lateral ligament ruptures are very, very common, and we can expect any gross elbow instability. That is like flail elbow, we call it, like it is not having a proper control. Your elbow is moving to and fro without any stability. So that is there. And detailed neurovascular assessment is recommended, like all the things we need. And nerve injuries means we can expect numbness, weakness of the muscles, and one more thing is any abnormal paresthesia sensation. And we need to, for sensory examination, it should match with the nerve which is commonly affected. Okay, it should how to say, okay, the specific nerve is involved means that specific sensory system, sensory area, that dermatome and myotome, maybe it's root level means we talk about that, or that specific sensory area or the muscles which it supplies should be matched. Then only we can proceed. Otherwise, sometimes due to fracture and due to injury also, we have that restriction. But what I'm saying is the neurovascular assessment should be complete and thorough. Then only we can find out whether is there any structure involved. Okay, so most of the whatever it is undisplaced, if the name undisplaced is there, means we can go for conservative one. Okay, so the type the most undisplaced type 1 intercondylar fractures can be treated successfully with POP and followed by elbow mobilization or elbow rehabilitation. And after that, type 2 and 3 fractures itself, like I told you, displaced, then if it is greater than a specific mm or a specific centimeter, you need to go for operative management. And in addition to that, if it is a rotational component is also involved, so no other way, we have to go for surgical. So what is the advantage means? In the closed reduction, we cannot have that 100% reduction. But in the open reduction, you can provide a proper anatomical alignment, and fixation is also perfect. We can fix it with any devices, any instruments we can use it. Okay, like plates, conduct plates. That is in this area we have like the shape is different. So in specific to that area, we have different instruments for that, and transcandular screws also can be used. And one more thing is ulnar nerve is very commonly affected, like after post-operatively, you may have this ulnar nerve palsy. That's what we call Tardy's ulnar nerve palsy, a delayed one. So sometimes what happen, it is surgery is we cannot like it's a contraindicated. Surgery is very risky for that type of people. We need to do like simple cuff and collar slings, because if it's like a life-threatening thing, if you are doing surgery, means it may be like he's very weak, or he's having diabetes mellitus, uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, or uncontrolled hypertension. In that kind of thing, if you are doing surgeries, really you are making it worse. So in that case, the collar and cuff sling may be advised. Maybe old age people, very febrile, very weak immune system, then we need to, no other options we have. And skin tractions, maybe you can give it some kind of gap, and then you immobilize this difficult fractures. So skin traction can be given, and then immobilize the fracture component. This is the this is a common POP application for this type of things, like above elbow POP is very widely used one. And this is the, I told you, right, specifically for this area we have different different instruments, right? So this is actually different types of fixations we have. Okay, we will see it in the separate chapter. What are the instruments? What is the use? Just see that we have different in different areas we can use different instruments, and we have separate class in the later after midsem we will have this section. In complications like ulnar neuritis, non-union, joint stiffness. Elderly only the joint stiffness is a major problem. Okay, otherwise in the young age the joint stiffness can be corrected. by doing any extra rehabilitation, or because it's very difficult to regain the joint stiffness or correcting the joint stiffness in elderly population. Okay, so that's it about that intercondylar fracture. We have like incidence of injuries around elbow. When you talk about like the majority of fractures or majority of injuries in the around elbow, I told you already, the supracondylar fractures, very common, like 65.4% of injuries around elbow fall under supracondylar one. And then we have condylar fractures, so that's why we talk now. This is for like 25.3. The next common one is this condylar fractures. And then you have the fracture neck of radius. Okay, this is for 4.7. And then we have Monteggia fracture. This is 2.2. Olecranon fracture 1.6. And then the T condylar fractures 0.8. Okay. And one more thing is in children's. If you take children's, the forearm bone fractures rank first, followed by fractures around the elbow region. So like radius and ulna fracture, forearm both bone fractures, that is the first one in the children's. And after that we have this type of supracondylar, lateral condyle, medial condyle, and T condylar are common in like sorry. Majority of the injuries around elbow, we can have supracondylar one. And in the distal humerus fracture, in the distal area, the supracondylar is the predominant. And then we have lateral condyle, medial condyle, and T condylar. Okay, so mainly children's, we already talked about the supracondylar fractures are common in children's. So the main reason is the ligament is not strong enough to control this movements, excessive movements, like hyperextension. So hyperextension is there means the ligament is too weak to allow this movements. That is the reason they get fractured in this aspect. Other one is sometimes hyperextension. Because of that laxity in the ligaments, hyperextension can cause bending force, that is reverse bending force. And this will be transferred. This olecranon concentrate this force to the weak supracondylar. There is a weak area in the whole humerus. That is what that triangle, triangular area and the just above the articular space. There is a weak point where there is a fractures are very common in children's. This weak point is easily gets collapsed. That's what, like already the bony architecture is very weak, as well as this ligament laxity and the other forces that transfers the like a linear force into weakness. Okay, we have two types of injuries, like fall on outstretched hand and fall on flexed hands. Okay, so this is elbow is extended, right? This is fall on outstretched hand. Sometimes what happen, they will do it like with the flexed elbows. Fall on flexed elbows are also common. So we, depending on this type of fractures, we have different types of mechanism. Okay, in this type, we have the extension type of supracondylar fracture is common. And if it is a flexed elbow, then we have flexed type of supracondylar fracture. We'll see it in detail. Okay, just know that whether it is outstretched hand, falling on the outstretched hand or falling on the flexed hand. Okay, so normally fall on the outstretched hand is the common phenomenon, and that will load the hyperextended elbow, and after that the ligament is also lax. So it allows the too much of hyperextension, and bending force is transferred by olecranon to that weak spot of that supracondylar area, and then the fracture occurs. Okay, this is normally, so this usually results in oblique fracture. Okay, so oblique is there means it is more of bending force and torsional force. And then I told you the flexion type is due to fall on flexed elbow. Okay, so this type of is two types. One is extension, one is flexion type. Okay, extension type means the displacement is posterior and very common. So 96% of supracondylar fractures are extension type. And flexion type is the displacement and like in anterior direction is very rare. Like mostly fall on flexed elbows are very, very rare. Only 4% of fractures develop in this category. So this is extension type. Okay, so extend, how we can find out means it's a upward and downward direction, right? Then it is a extension type. So both are extension type fractures. So when we know that if the distal segment is moved posteriorly, then it is extension type. Or sometimes your humerus, the remaining humerus moves posteriorly and this will come forward. This is called flexion type. So diagnosis, the same thing, pain, swelling, and displaced means the prominent deformity, and if any elbow ligaments are involved means that is LCL, lateral collateral and medial collateral ligament involved means more flail and uncontrolled elbow. Okay, and check for the radiographic findings of relationship between this triangle, okay, equilateral triangle. Because this relationship between this medial and lateral epicondyle and olecranon is very important, because that will tell you whether it is a posterior dislocation or supracondylar fracture. Okay, so that is there. And we have one more thing called radial, median and ulnar nerve. Any nerve can be affected. So this thing is very careful to check all the three nerves, because all are crossing the elbow joint, that is in the supracondylar area. So according to the displacement, we have any one of the nerve may be injured, or maybe two or three also gets affected. So here undisplaced means non-operative, usually achieved by yearly mobilization, yearly exercises we can start. So if it is an undisplaced one means it's very safe to progress the thing. So you need to check the X-ray. After injury and after reduction, we need to check how much of impacted. Impacted means it's very, very safe or stable fractures, or undisplaced. Only you feel that there is a break in the continuity, but there is no change in the segments. Then we can go for yearly mobilization and yearly exercise. It's very easy to follow up. And then we have closed manipulation. So sometimes some fractures are more minimally displaced, means we can correct it. Some displacements can be corrected under anesthesia. Maybe due to pain, they can't cooperate. So if you after under anesthesia, we can correct it anatomically. Okay, that is the one thing we can do. And after correction or after reduction and all, you need to check the neurovascular status. Okay, artery and nerve, vein, and then if needed you can take one more. So what is the thing means, more complicated fractures means for first 3 weeks, weekly once we have to take x-rays, very complicated one. And after that we can go for longer periods without any x-rays. And the final one, sometimes it's decided by the concerned physician. So if reduction cannot be achieved, sometimes we may reduce it under general anesthesia, but it is not that adequately reduced, means we can develop a skin traction. So for 2 or 3 days, they need to be in that traction. Thereby, it slowly it can come to the normal alignment. Or either you can use skin traction, or sometimes the percutaneous K wires may be used to hold, because I told you this is the area where muscle forces are very high, so many muscles. So if it gets collapsed, means we cannot align it. So this percutaneous K wires also used to hold the reduced position. This thing can be done by laparoscopically. We can do that. It's not a very complicated surgical procedures. Okay, thereby we are protecting the ulnar nerve. This K wire fixation and all, it's very easy. It's like just a laparoscopic procedure. We don't want to open it, or there is no repair of muscles. Everything is safe. Okay, so the conservative management, we have this type of things. After wrapping it with this stockings, I think it's not stocking. I'm not sure about this specific name for that. They will just wind it up. This is like cotton gauze, that kind of bandages. They just wrap it, and then they do one thick slabs, and then they tie it with POP structures. That POP wraps are added up in the third step. Okay, this is for like for skin traction. For continuous hours, we need to apply this Dunlop skin traction. And this is percutaneous K wires. And out of this, the radial nerve is because extension type is very common, right? So extension type is there, means the segment that the distal segment is moved posteriorly. So in that thing, the radial nerve is the one which commonly gets affected, followed by median and ulnar. And if your risk of damage to ulnar nerve is high, means when it is very high for ulnar nerve injury, means sometimes from the medial aspect, if they are not they are not retracting it, or the ulnar nerve is not adequately marked and then segregated, and then introducing a K wire. Sometimes like it's some Surgical errors can cause damage to ulnar nerve. Okay. Next thing is this is for supracondylar fracture, and tomorrow I will discuss the rehabilitation for supracondylar fractures. Supracondylar as well as intercondylar fractures, everything I will discuss it in tomorrow's class. Now we will start elbow fracture and dislocation. So that's all. The arm region is over. Proximal humerus, mid shaft, and distal. Okay. So now we are coming to the elbow fracture and dislocations. So out of it's like out of 100%, 11 to 28% of injuries to the elbow, this elbow dislocation accounts for 11 to 28%, and out of all the dislocations, posterior dislocation, because the fall on outstretched hand means the most common pattern of displacement is posterior. Okay, that's why the posterior dislocation is more common. And here also it is in the young age group, like 10 to 20 years, and the sports people, most commonly it's a sports injury. That's what I told you. Fall on outstretched hand. And one more thing is some kind of movements like hyperextension, valgus stress, arm abduction, and forearm supination. This kind of things cause posterior dislocation. And elbow flexed. This is what I told you. The flexed elbow and fall on the outstretched hand can cause anterior dislocation. The common one is this one, posterior. Okay, the thing is immediately the dislocations and subluxations and all, immediately the patient develops spasm or guarding. That is an important sign. Like there is a fear for movement because it may be dislocated or it may get subluxed. That is a fear they have for a long time. So that is there. That is a one important clinical sign or clinical symptom we can get. And then the gross deformity and swelling would be there. Immediately the swelling is there, and we can't have any prominent landmarks, right? The both medial and lateral of epicondyle. Then in that medial and lateral aspect, you can see a swelling, markable swelling would be there. And so one more thing, for like other fractures, here also neurovascular exams are very important. So same thing is posterior dislocation, closed reduction under anesthesia, anterior also like that. So exactly opposite. How the accident or how the fracture occurs, exactly opposite to that, you can do it to correct the dislocation. So if it's a hyperextended fracture, right, hyperextended elbow causes the problem, means we can produce a reduction with flexed elbow. Okay, while giving a distal traction, the elbow should be flexed.